From the very beginning, we assumed that we want Easy Taxi to be the company which is driven by the culture, meaning where people come here, that they understand what is the purpose of the company, what is our mission, but also what is their role, that they feel obliged to help the market, that they have a sense of ownership, that we empower them. And until today, we largely remain a startup, right? We want to be a startup and we want to maintain the mentality of the startup.
I'll talk now to Paul Malicki, CMO of Easy Taxi. How did the business start?
Easy Taxi started 5 years ago here in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. The idea is very straightforward. The app allows you to hail a taxi or a private car, depending on the market. I think as any other startup, Easy Taxi has really started out of the need, of the idea that has to be backed by technology, or the problem which has to be solved by technology. And at that time, if you look at the Brazilian market 5 years ago, there was no solution which would allow you to effectively book a taxi. And that's really the beginning of the story. Soon after, Easy Taxi became the first app globally to expand to other markets, and within 2 years' time, we were already present in 30 countries and more than 400 cities. Today, Easy Taxi is largely focused on Latin America. That's where we believe is the largest potential. The public transportation market in Latin America is still largely based on the taxi segment. Oftentimes there's no effective metro system. So the potential in the long term of urban mobility is enormous in Brazil and in other leading markets such as Colombia, Mexico, or Peru.
And that story about the very beginning in Rio de Janeiro.
Right, so our co-founder, Thales, who is a serious entrepreneur, he actually had an idea at that time to launch a bus booking application. But he really suffered from the lack of taxis in Rio. It was raining really heavily, and he thought, why don't I just create an app which would allow people to book a taxi instead? And he verified his idea, actually in a very manual process, calling the drivers and processing those requests through the desktop application, so a very interesting MVP. And eventually the idea worked and became a hit here in Brazil very, very fast.
And how do you deal with the competitors?
Well, competitors, in our business we need competitors because this market has a problem of reputation, and by the end of the day what matters is that we can all come together and educate the users, promote the technologies which are safe, efficient, and learn from one another. Also, when you look at the history of the taxi segment and of the entire taxi market, this market is highly regulated, and this has strong benefits, but also it has a lot of cons, which we have to solve. And paradoxically speaking, that's where the competitors help out, because some of the models that they introduce are so disruptive that they help us push innovation within Easy Taxi as well.
Were you the first one to come to Brazil?
We were the first to set up the taxi app in Brazil, and at that time there was no other competitor. Very quickly, other apps flourished on the market. I remember when I came to Easy Taxi, we had around 20 competitors already in Brazil. Today, when you look at the entire Latin America, which is a way larger market as such, we have potentially 4 strong long-term players. It is not an easy market. It is a market which requires a lot of resources, speed, long-term thinking, and impeccable execution. So I think that's the reason why Easy Taxi is one of the only apps that has really survived this difficult turmoil on the market. It is really not an easy one.
And how to face the competition with Uber?
Right. Well, Uber is of course becoming a very valid buzzword on the market. I think that by the end of the day, what passengers want is a mixture of, on one hand, efficiency, on the other hand, convenience, and that's where we try to compete. We try to be efficient by introducing ride-sharing services, which is something new I can share with you. Just last week we have introduced carpooling. We try to be efficient through effective promotion, marketing campaigns, which allow users to book a taxi cheaper, which allow them to share the voucher with a friend, to use loyalty programs, but also we try to be convenient. And that's where new service types come into place. We also run a very detailed driver governance project, which allow us to promote the best drivers, but also to reduce the number of taxis which do not meet our requirements. And by the end of the day, these two forces, they meet, and that's where the competition flourishes.
What about the philosophy of the company? How can you keep startup feeling or way of work after this growth?
Totally, it's a very interesting question. From the very beginning, we assumed that we want Easy Taxi to be the company which is driven by the culture, meaning where people come here, that they understand what is the purpose of the company, what is our mission, but also what is their role, that they feel obliged to help the market, that they have a sense of ownership, that we empower them. And until today, we largely remain a startup, right? We want to be a startup, and we want to maintain the mentality of the startup. It helps us become more efficient because it kills these barriers between people. It helps us maintain the young culture where everyone is really energetic and keen to help. It helps us to maintain unprecedented speed. We execute quickly, and we are very passionate about what we do.
Paul, thank you so much for now, because we will continue this conversation in a second part of this interview to talk about numbers, okay?
Totally. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Luciane Miranda to Dukascopy TV.